Please welcome TechCrunch reporter Hayayan Camps and Anu Hariharan, Managing Director, YC Continuity at Y Combinator.
Hello, everybody. It's almost like we have a full room because people want to know how you get into Y Combinator.
That's
Funny
great.
that.
That's really good.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here.
Hi. Yes.
So I'm joined here with Anu, who is part of the fund that invests into later stage Y Combinator companies.
Yes, that's right. So I help lead our growth fund called YC Continuity, which doubles down in YC's companies.
You guys have a lot to double down on.
That is true. I often say we are privileged or humbled by the opportunity to partner with some of the amazing YC founders.
Yeah, I love it. There's a QR code down here somewhere. Please ask questions. I am just here to look pretty and to further these questions. I'm also sitting here with a little phone that actually gets your questions, so I'm not texting my mom, although she would probably love that. Well, we have some questions already, so I don't even have to use my prepared questions.
That's
Isn't that
great.
amazing?
Yeah.
What is the most important question you look at in the Y Combinator application?
Oh, I think that if you ask different YC partners, there will be different, preferences in terms of what is their favorite question. My personal favorite is actually 2 or 3. I think one is really hard. One is how long have you known your co-founder? It tells a lot about how much trust and how long of a duration have you spent with the co-founder, and not just in sense of time, but like the depth of the relationship. The other thing that's my personal favorite is what's something that you have hacked on outside of the current startup idea, and there are some really interesting answers, and that kind of tells about how resourceful the founders are.
Would you tell me one of your favorite side hustles, side hacks?
One of my favorite side hacks. Well, there was this founder that had, I think, exploited the flight points in so many different ways without having ever collected enough miles to be on loyalty or any sort of premium, and yet got business class all pretty much free, and for almost 10 to 15 flights.
People do that for a lot of stuff. It's wonderful. Another question here. Are solo founders always a no-go? That's
not true at all. We do fund solo founders, but I think the important takeaway, and especially now I've been at YC almost close to 7 years, I can tell you that it's really hard to build a company as a solo founder. So there's a reason why we encourage founders to have at least one co-founder. It's a battle of wills, and if your startup is successful, you're going to be building it for 10, 20, 30 years, and it's really hard to go through that journey alone. So we strongly recommend that founders find a co-founder, but we have funded founders who are solo founders.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of companies myself, and I find just for continuity purposes, right? Sometimes somebody just needs a break or needs some downtime for medical reasons or whatever. Having somebody who's been there from the beginning is so powerful.
Not even, that's true, but just not even that. I always say it's a roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And the highs are high and the lows are really low, and both can happen on the same day. And you just need someone that you trust. You can have a conversation when you're low. Hopefully they'll lift you up, and when they're low, you'll lift them up. So that's really what a great co-founding team looks like. And if you can have that, that's a big plus.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Another really good question here. How much money do you need to raise before you get into Y Combinator?
Oh, no, zero. Actually, most of the applications just have an idea. They haven't even launched. They haven't raised any money. They don't have traction. We, in fact, would say you don't need to have raised any money. We prefer, I would even go first to say, we prefer that you haven't raised any money and you're at the very early stage of starting a company.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Does a referral help you get an interview with Y Combinator?
Absolutely not. That's the reason we have an application. We do not like referral. I wouldn't say it's a negative, but we don't pay any attention to it or give it extra signal. Now, if once in a while a YC founder says very strongly or gives a very strong referral because they've worked with that person, okay, that helps, but I would say a large portion of our founders had no referrals coming in.
Yeah. So you guys built like a whole system to kind of deal with all those applications, right? Because I think you get more than 1 or 2 per cohort.
Yes, I mean, more than 1 or 2, that's a few hundreds of them. Yes.
1,000, yeah.
I mean, the whole reason we had the YC application is, one, we just wanted people to tell us what we were looking for. It's such a stark difference from the Series A pitch or any of the subsequent pitches that you do, because you put together a pitch deck, no firm tells you what they're looking for. And we just said, wow, that sounds bizarre. We know what we are looking for, just let's ask that in the application, so just write it out. And a large portion of our sort of selection process is really around, is there some sort of founder market fit? Is there at least one technical founder, co-founder? Because we think that's what it takes to start shipping at a high velocity and test it out during those 12 weeks and launch the product. And so it has nothing to do with referral. And we don't want it to be that way. In fact, we don't want this to be a closed network. So you should be able to get into YC without having to know anyone in the YC team or any YC founder.
I sat through makes it sound very negative. I enjoyed the demo day this year, and even just at that scale, it's just an incredible number of super high quality companies that come out the other side. How good are they when they go in? Or like what is the delta from the beginning to the end of the program?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the selection process itself is pretty stringent, right? Our acceptance rate is less than 2%. So the fact is, the fact that they made it itself means they stood out of the rest of the applicant pool. Their application was clear, the idea is good. But in many cases, I don't remember the exact percentage, but a significant percentage haven't launched. Mm-hmm. So in those 12 weeks, what the group partners are working with them is essentially getting them to launch, talk to customers, and figure out what is the use case, what is that early sign of business model, right? Mm-hmm. Those are only the 2 things that they're tweaking. So a large portion of them launched during YC.
Yeah, no, I love that. What's the number 1 drawback of going through YC as a founder?
Well, I think...
It wasn't me. Somebody in this room.
I don't know what is the drawback. I'm very biased. I think YC is one of the best institutions you could go to. You should ask other founders.
Very good answer. What's the biggest red flag you see on YC applications or in the interview process?
Red flag, I'd say 2 common red flags. One, actually, I think Dalton Caldwell, who was at TechCrunch a couple of years ago, touched on this, which is, you are starting a company just because that's the hottest thing right now, which is, a year ago it was crypto, maybe now it's something in AI, and that you can see through the application. Mm-hmm. Because, he calls it the tar pit idea, because you haven't really flushed it out. You just know there are a lot of investors interested in investing in that space, and the application is so blurred. Like, we cannot even understand what is the idea, what is that product, even though you have not built it. So that's number 1. That's one of the most common things. Or, we look, I wouldn't call it red flag, but a yellow to red flag. We try to test it out. The second red flag is explicitly lying. Don't lie. It's just say whatever you are building on. And sometimes, not too often, but once in a while, we do see there is a big disconnect in what they said in the application versus what they're actually doing.
3 weeks into the lockdown, I ended up launching a virtual events platform. I am that founder, basically. But that's why I'm back on stage, not a founder anymore. This is, it happens a lot where people go, oh, this is the next cool thing. But I think it actually goes to something you said earlier, which is the founder market fit, right? Like somebody who has a really deep understanding of a particular industry or market dynamic has a much higher chance of being successful as a founder. And I imagine that's actually the extension of what we're talking about here. Like, if you are a fair weather founder or somebody who kind of goes with the flows, you probably don't have that founder market fit.
Exactly. Like, I always use Christina from Vanta as an example. Like, would we have known 5 years ago that Christina was the founder to start a real-time SOT, SOC 2 compliance product? Probably not. But look at her background. When she came to YC, she basically said, I worked on Dropbox paper. While I was working in Dropbox, every SOC 2 compliance was so painful. I went and asked other companies and 30 other product managers, did they face the same problem? And that's how the idea came, right? And they hadn't launched. I mean, they were just in the very early innings when they were going through YC. But for us, that's founder market fit, right? So we're not asking like, hey, have you spent 10 years in SOC 2 compliance? But it was a problem you experienced in some role, and you've kind of tested it as whether it's a problem with at least 30 to 40 other teams. We have some sense for that, and you're technical enough to solve it, right? That's kind of what we mean by founder market fit.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's actually interesting, as sitting here as somebody from TechCrunch, we're a little bit complicit in that, right? We do a lot of writing about Elon Musk, who's done I don't know how many companies and God knows how many different fields. You're like, there cannot be perfect founder market fit in all of these. And I imagine that if you get, he probably wouldn't apply to Y Combinator, but if he did, you ended up with an application that is like, you're all over the place. What's going on?
So I would, actually a great example of that is Blake, the founder of Boom, right? He is a YC founder. So Blake's background, for those of you that don't know, he actually started a company in the coupon space in e-commerce. He sold it to Groupon, that has also worked at Amazon. And then here is a guy who is building supersonic jets. But the amount of work he had done, put in to understand the space, what was going to be different about the supersonic jet this time that he's building. He also has had a passion for flying planes and deeply understands this, was very evident in the application.
Yeah.
And so then we knew that this was a battle of wills. He also had started the company a year before he went through YC, and he had sort of enough proof points in the application that he had deep understanding of the space. So we did accept him.
Yeah, thank you. How much weight do you typically place on kind of IP rights, so pending or issued patent filings and that kind of thing as part of
We
the
don't.
application?
I just think that people tend to, especially founders sometimes over-rotate on this, thinking a patent is going to kill the company or IP is going to kill the company. Those things never kill the company. In our experience, internal disputes and ignoring customers, the single biggest reason companies die, not because a competitor launched, not because of IP. So we don't.
Yeah, I was just saying, there are way more efficient ways of killing companies
Yes.
than IP. Does Y Combinator ever fund startups that aren't deeply software-based?
That are
Not deeply software-based. You just mentioned Boom, so I guess we kind of...
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think what we've funded probably more than 3,500 companies, so we've definitely funded all the outliers that you can imagine. I think that when we say deeply software, that's like hard tech. But as I said, like what we are looking for is when I say technical co-founder, it's not just software founder. Like, do you have domain expertise in whatever you're doing? So in bio, it would be something deep in bio. And have you demonstrated that you can work on products like that, which especially require FDA clearance? In the case of hard tech, it's like, do you have deep understanding of the hard science that's behind it? So that's kind of how we look. Now, there is a certain element we use, which is like, we should also be, as YC, able to help them in those 12 weeks. So we use that lens. So if it's totally an outlier and we don't understand, sorry about that, we don't understand, then, we may not be the right fit and we may not get it either. So we are very transparent with the founders then.
Yeah. So in this app, there's a feature where people can upvote questions. And now the top one is in all caps.
Okay.
I'm going to try and not shout it, but it says, what happens in the elusive 12 weeks at YC?
Well, actually, it's like, you ask a YC founder before they go through YC, and they have this impression of what happens in 12 weeks. And after demo day, whenever I ask them, what do you think happened in 12 weeks? They were like, oh, man, I didn't know this was what was going to happen. So what happens in the 12 weeks is essentially, look, there are only two things we want you to do. Write code, talk to users. That's it. It's as disciplined as that. And we divide you into groups. So there are about 4 groups. You have a peer group. Every 2 weeks, you have a group officer check-in with the group partners and the rest of the group. You also do lots of officers with the group partners. But really, in that 12 weeks, our goal as partners is get you to focus. Focus is launch. Launch, why are you waiting? Perfect is the enemy of the good. Get to a launch. Have you at least recruited 100 users? What's their feedback? If it's B2B SaaS, probably 10 users, right? So depending on the product, it's different. What did you learn from them? Okay, if it's really working well, can you scale? Can you make it from 10 to 30 users next week? So that's really what's going on. And when I ask founders at the start of the batch, they think there's going to be this whole programming and there's lots of parties. No. Write code, talk to users, get ready for demo day at the end of 12 weeks. That's it.
I love the simplicity. We should just do more of that. I love that. I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask you anyway. Is it better to prove out an idea and then apply, or apply as early as you possibly can?
There is no right time to apply, so I would apply. We've accepted all forms of teams with ideas which they pivot. We have a lot of pivots. I mean, you guys are going to hear from Brex next, which had applied as a VR startup into YC, and that's how we took them in. We believe in strong teams. Teams come first. We do want to test a little bit of the founder market idea, and what we are really testing there is this a tar pit idea? Do they really understand what they're doing? Sometimes when we accept teams, we tell them, we don't like your idea, would you be open to a pivot? Because we don't think you actually have deep domain expertise. So we do that too. So I would say apply at the first instance you think you want to start. And by the way, the other truth is we've accepted companies that applied the second and third time. In fact, a good portion of YC companies that get in come in at the second and third time because they've kind of done at least 2 iterations of their idea.
Mm-hmm. And so when you ask somebody to pivot, does that mean pivoting from their idea into their domain expertise? Or
Yeah.
like what does a pivot request look like?
I mean, so basically, for example, Brex is a great example, right? They came in as a virtual reality startup. And we thought they're amazing founders that built Stripe for Brazil. They know fintech, and they're doing virtual reality. So we said, would you be open to a pivot? Now, of course, really good founders often say, yes, if this doesn't work, we're open to a pivot. But it's not like they walk in day one and we say, you have to pivot. It's kind of, the founder has to own the idea. I think within 3 weeks of them starting, they realized they had no clue about hardware. And they said, okay, this is not the company we should work on. And then they started brainstorming fintech ideas. So that's a pivot.
And it worked out.
Yes. I mean, Gusto was a pivot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of successful YC companies that were a pivot during the batch.
Yeah. But I think that speaks to you having a particular, you as in Y Combinator, having a particular strength for picking the kind of founders who are showing promise, right? And showing, like, what is that X factor? What is the thing that makes you go, actually, love the founders, hate the product, try over kind of thing?
Yeah. I think that if you think about it, the number one, and PG has written about this, the number one thing a founder needs to succeed is determination. Mm-hmm. It's not intelligence, actually, it's more determination. Now, of course, they need to have domain knowledge, and it needs to translate into execution, but determination solves a lot more problems. So that's what we are really testing for in both the application and the interview process. If you look at our interview, we don't ask you to come pitch your company again. We've already read your application, and the questions are hard questions. And so what we are looking for there is, we know as a founder you don't have the answers to everything. And most founders, almost all founders, are optimists. But when can they be rational and say, oh, that's a good question and I don't know the answer to that, or I need to double click on that and learn along the way? Because the most important thing is a combination of determination and resourcefulness to learn along the way to scale, because there's going to be a lot of surprises in your journey. So that's what we are testing for.
I love that. As somebody who's not particularly intelligent, but very stubborn, I feel like you just gave me some hope there into it. Will Y Combinator ever go back to being in person?
We are in person.
Ding.
So the last batch actually had significant in-person component. In fact, we just announced the next batch will also be in person. So we do have a big in-person component. We have a weekly Thursday meeting where the founders meet regularly on a weekly basis, and we started that since the last batch.
Yeah, love it. What level of feedback do you give on rejections or people who don't make it to the end of the application process?
So one thing YC really I think strives to do, not just on the early stage, we do that even at Continuity, is we are very honest with feedback. There's no sugarcoating. We tell you, ask us what we think. We are going to be wrong many times, but at least we are very honest whenever we say what the exact issue is. I think when it comes to application, pretty much everybody gets feedback. Sometimes the feedback may sound dissatisfying, but the reality is we get more than 15,000 applications. And so if that clarity in that application as to why you're working on the idea and the composition of the team doesn't exist, the middle of the pack can find our feedback frustrating. We hear that. But it's just simply that. I wouldn't read into it more than that. Like the really clear applications automatically surface to the top.
Mm-hmm. For TechCrunch, I do the pitch deck teardown. So I look at a lot of pitch decks. And it's so incredibly obvious if there's a good pitch there. You know,
Yeah.
there can be mistakes, there can be like quirks, but if it's good, and it's like it shouts basically.
Yes.
We only have a few seconds left, but I have a question here that I know the answer to, so I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you fund startups from Southeast Asia or developing countries, or do people have to be in the US?
No. In fact, I think more than 40% of the last batch, the most recent batch was from outside the US. We fund companies from everywhere. We have a lot of companies from Southeast Asia. I think our second largest applicant pool is actually India. We funded lots of startups in LATAM. So no, YC is global.
I could sit and talk to you and ask you questions all day, but we're out of time. Thank you for being a wonderful audience, for sending me way more questions than I know what to do with. Have a beautiful day.